I will also say that in the state of South Carolina, which I represent, there's no disturbance of an alarming character in any one of the counties in which the Republicans have a majority. The troubles are usually in those sections in which the Democrats have control. I say to the entire membership of the Democratic Party that upon your hands rests the blood of the loyal men of the South. Disclaim it as you will, but the stain is there to prove your criminality before man and God in the world in the day of retribution, which will surely come. I pity the man or party of men who would seek to ride into power over the dead body of a legitimate opponent. I can say for my people that we are fully determined to stand by the Republican Party and the government. We have resolved to be loyal and firm, and as Queen Esther said long ago, if we perish, we perish. I earnestly hope that this bill will pass.
That bill did pass, but only over the united opposition of Democrats. In fact, no Democrat, not a single one, either from the North or the South, supported the Civil Rights Bill to punish Klan violence. 4 years later, Black Americans again played a significant role in the debates on a Civil Rights Bill, this time the Civil Rights Bill of 1875 to prohibit segregation and racial discrimination. Following one Democratic tirade against the bill, Representative Robert Brown Elliott rose to respond. It was such a climactic moment that the artists of the day created illustrations depicting the verbal battle that occurred between this black Republican and Democrat Alexander Stephens, who had been the Vice President of the Confederacy and who was a leader of the Democratic arguments on the bill. Elliott's magnificent response did not convert Alexander Stephens or the other Democrats, but it was so eloquent that it silenced them. In fact, the Democrats' rebuttal against Elliott was so weak that the best they could do was to claim that the speech was not really his, that it was so brilliant that someone else must have written it, that surely a black American such as Elliott could not have created such a masterful speech. He so completely befuddled them with his oratorical skills that all they could do was claim that someone else must have written his speech. Representative John Roy Lynch of Mississippi, in closing his speech on the same bill, predicted what he believed would be the outcome of the vote.
In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I say to the Republican members of the House that the passage of this bill is expected by you. If any of our Democratic friends will vote for it, we will be agreeably surprised. But if Republicans should vote against it, we will be sorely disappointed. But I have no fears whatever in this respect. Republicans have stood by the colored people of this country when it was more unpopular to do so than it is to pass this bill. You have fulfilled every promise thus far, and I have no reason to believe that you will not fulfill this one.
That Civil Rights Bill did pass, but regrettably, Representative Lynch did not receive the surprise he'd hoped for. It was exactly as he had suspected. While Republicans overwhelmingly supported the bill, not a single one of the 114 Democrats in Congress voted for that Civil Rights Bill. That Civil Rights Bill, like the others, was passed by Republicans over strident and virtually unanimous opposition of Democrats. That 1875 Civil Rights Bill was the last of the almost 24 civil rights bills passed by Republicans. In fact, following the passage of that 1875 bill, it would be nearly 90 years before the next civil rights law was passed. Why did the rapid progress come to an abrupt halt after 1875? Because in 1876, Democrats gained control of the U.S. House for the first time since 1861. Therefore, with the divided Congress, Democrats successfully blocked any further progress in the civil rights arena. Facing such strident and irrational Democrat obstructionists, the enthusiasm for fighting in that arena soon waned and civil rights momentum was lost. However, not only did Democrats gain the U.S. House in 1876, but they were able to bring Reconstruction to a close by having all federal troops withdrawn from the South, thus removing the final protective barrier between black Americans and those Democrats aggressively seeking to violate their newfound civil rights. From that point forward, the South became known as the, quote, solid Democratic South. Southern state legislatures were again solidly in the hands of Democrats, and white supremacy in the South was reestablished, barring Southern blacks from federal elective offices for an additional 70 years. Returning to 1876, public debate began to focus on issues that had already been raised in earlier civil rights laws, laws and issues that Democrats were now trying to reverse, issues such as education. For example, this piece, entitled Politics and the School Question, Attitude of the Republican and Democratic Parties in 1876, examined the contrasting positions of the two parties on the issue of education. The Republicans had supported public education for all children, regardless of race, but Democrats not only opposed public education for all children, but in fact strongly supported segregated education. For example, this is a published and widely distributed pro-segregation speech by Democratic Congressman James Harper of North Carolina. Notice its title, Separate Schools for Whites and Colored with Equal Advantages. Mixed schools? Never. Similarly, in 1875, the Democratic Executive Committee of Ohio issued this piece on public education to, as they said, expose the tricks of the Republican Executive Committee. What were the so-called dirty tricks of Republicans to which Democrats objected, and what was intended to be an insult about Republicans?
The only positive action of the Republican Party on the school question in Ohio is to destroy the system by requiring that whites and blacks be educated together.
The Democratic response against open education for black youth sometimes went beyond words to acts of violence, such as when they burned down 8 schools in Memphis in which black youth were being taught. Additionally, since churches in the South frequently provided education for youth, such as St. Philip's Church in Richmond, churches were also frequently burned down. And this is a flyer distributed by the Klan in North Carolina showing a school teacher being stripped and beaten. That flyer, distributed to teachers, warned, Miss Whoever, we send you a picture of the way we treated a Yankee schoolma'am in this county last year. Beware lest you share the same fate. Black leaders understood that good education was important not only to black Americans, but also to the future of the country. Representative Joseph Hayne Rainey, speaking on a bill to strengthen the education system for all students, including young black students, wisely reminded the opposing Democrats,
I shall remind the House of one thing more. The youth now springing up to manhood will be the future lawmakers and rulers of our country. That they should be intelligent and thoroughly educated is a prime necessity and of great importance, which is admitted by all and denied by none. All that may be done with this end in view will be returned with an increased interest. I truly hope that those Democrats who oppose this bill will reconsider their opposition and give it their vote when the question shall again be before the House. For one, I shall give it my hearty support, believing it to be just and beneficial in its provisions.
Unfortunately, 87% of the Democrats in Congress at that time voted against that education bill. Segregated, inferior, and dilapidated schools for blacks became the norm in the southern states under Democratic control. In 1954, the Supreme Court in Brown v. Board of Education finally struck down state segregation laws in education, thus reinstating what Republicans had done nearly 75 years earlier in the 1875 Civil Rights Bill. What was the Southern Democratic response to the court decision finally ending segregated education? There was a twofold response, one of words and one of actions. In the category of words, 100 Democrats in Congress, 19 senators and 81 representatives, passed the Southern Manifesto denouncing the court's decision to end segregation. Those 100 Democrats declared in 1956 that desegregation was, quote, certain to destroy the system of public education and that there would be what they called an explosive and dangerous condition created by this decision. Also in the category of words, Democratic Governor Herman Talmadge of Georgia issued a written attack on the court decision and promised that, quote, there will never be mixed schools while I am governor. Mississippi Democratic Governor James Coleman, when asked in an interview on Meet the Press whether the public schools of Mississippi would ever be integrated, succinctly replied, I would say that a baby born in Mississippi today will never live long enough to see an integrated school. This was typical of what many Southern Democrats did in the category of words.